Thing.
Hey, Lauren.
Hey, Courtney.
Sorry, I was the DSA socialist. I'm trying to jump over and I was almost done. They just got a little bit of a late start. So,
All right. Well, we're live right now, and I just want to welcome everybody to my show, The Robust Opposition. And my guest tonight is Courtney Booth, who's a public defender here in Buncombe County, running to be district attorney. So welcome to the show. Better late than never. And
thank you. And I apologize.
No worries. I know how DSA can be. I'm a member myself. Anyway, I always start by asking my guests about their background. So let's talk about where you're from, how long you lived in Asheville, why you decided to be a public defender, first of all, and then end this question with, and why you are running for district attorney.
Okay. I'm from West Virginia, originally. That's where I grew up. I grew up in the same house in the mountains. And so I'm quite accustomed to the mountains. I went to school in North Carolina. I was the youngest in my class. The age cutoff used to be, I think, in October. So I was an October baby, and I drove here at 17 to go to college at Salem College, which was a women's college. I had a part scholarship. And so I really got out of my comfort zone because I'm from West Virginia, but I'd never left home, and I was pretty young. And looking back on that, that's pretty crazy that I was 17 years old. But went to school, took my first job at AT&T Bank. Soon realized that I was not a banker. That was not for me for sure. And I quit right around 9/11 and worked as a substitute teacher. Thought that teaching would be my path because I needed something that would be fulfilling for me, and I needed a way to give back. Somehow ended up in law school. And I'm not really sure how that actually happened, other than I took the LSAT and ended up in law school. So I went to North Carolina Central, great school, public school in Durham. And then the way I became a public defender was during law school, you do internships. And my first internship was in Charlotte at the public defender's office. Wasn't even sure what exactly they did. I didn't know. I didn't know any of these things. It was after my first year in law school. And I worked with a lady who did property crimes. And we worked on a case where an African-American male was charged with stealing I think it was a fancy like Persian rug from a furniture store where he worked. And they charged him with a felony. And I can't recall if it was value-based or just because he was an employee, it was a felony. And then they were going to habitualize him because it was a 3 strikes you're out for stealing a fancy rug from where he worked. And so we worked on that case, and it was really interesting. We went and did interviews, and she got enough information to get the case dismissed. And I really got into it. That was kind of it for me that summer between my first year and my second year. And then in the second year, between my third year, I interned at the Orange Chatham public defender's office as well. And when I graduated law school, I knew that's what I wanted to do. I loved criminal law. And so I made application. And fortunately, it was the toss up between Fayetteville and Asheville. And I was lucky to get the job in Asheville first and foremost. So I've been here since October of 2005. Where I've worked exclusively in the Buncombe County Courthouse as an assistant public defender.
Okay. And talk about before we get into why you decided you wanted to run for district attorney, talk about some of your proudest accomplishments as a public defender.
Actually, I'm hoping to see this person and his family tomorrow at Asheville Music Hall. One of my proudest accomplishments was pretty recent. It was in September. I had a young black male, I think he was 21 years old, no record at all. Wanted to be a truck driver, was working on a CDL license, and he literally was charged with a terrible investigation with shooting someone. And the investigation was awful, just awful. And I knew he was innocent. His family knew he was innocent. He was found not guilty. And it was a week-long jury trial. And it was one of the most stressful experiences of my life, because if we lost, and this is how the criminal justice system is, we had 12 strangers deciding his fate. And that's really, really scary. I speak to his mother fairly regularly still. We stay in contact. And she told me a few days ago that as a mom, that was the worst experience she could go through for her son. But she said, you became his mama for that week. And she goes, I was so thankful that he had you, because that was the scariest experience we've ever gone through. Now, his charge had pended probably for a little bit over a year. So the family was even dealing with just that stress on a daily basis. He was dealing with that stress, and then the stress of a jury trial. So the jury made the right decision, fortunately, but it was really scary. It was really scary because I know this kid was innocent.
Mm. Well, I wish you good luck on that case. Now, tell me why you are running for district attorney. You're not the first public defender I interviewed who is running for this position, and it's happening all over the country, by the way. There's a big trend. But what made you want to run for district attorney?
Well, I've been here for so long, and I had hope that when Todd Williams was elected 2 terms ago, when he defeated, I believe, a 24-year incumbent, Ron Moore. A lot of people have moved here. They don't know these characters, but I had practiced as well at the public defender's office when Ron was a DA. We all had hope. Ron was a very law and order, very lock 'em away, habitualize a lot of people district attorney. We had hope that Todd, being a public defender, being a capital defender, would really make some reforms. Would get rid of habitual felon. Would would not pursue mandatory minimums in drug cases. Would not pursue the death penalty, especially since he was a former capital defender. And I even canvassed. I canvassed for those hopes for Todd years ago. A lot of us did. And then we became disenchanted, disappointed, because it didn't happen. And when he was declaring, he's declared at least 3 cases himself capital. One of them was actually tried as a death penalty trial until after the verdict, and after over a 2-month trial, they took death off the table. But they were picking a jury based on the government asking to kill someone. And just over the years of not seeing change, over the years of seeing my poor clients being stuck in the system, over the years of seeing my Black and brown clients being stuck in the system, being put in the system, in my opinion, more often, just because of where they live, and how often, police are even in their neighborhoods. I got sick and tired of it. I'm a strong person. I know the law. I'm a good lawyer. And I said, I've done this long enough. There's a lot of discretion, and there's a lot of power to bring more good to the community when you're in the position of power. I have fought tooth and nail to fight and stand up for my clients over the years, but sometimes that's not enough, because when it's the state of North Carolina versus your poor client, it's just not enough. So I saw that, and I've followed the reform movements over the, in Philadelphia, I guess San Francisco, Chicago, I think even in Georgia. And I said, you know what? I can do this. I can do this. So I stepped up.
Now, talk about how you would do things differently. I mean, obviously, you're not going to prosecute these death penalty or charge the death penalty in these cases. What other ways, as district attorney, are you going to be able to tackle some of these racial injustices that you describe?
Right. The racial injustices, yes. Now, I get to see body camera of my cases, so I get to see limited pieces of body camera from officers. As a district attorney, you can watch everyone's body camera. So what I feel is happening is I don't know if you know that there's cameras in Asheville Housing Authority properties, and Asheville Housing Authority properties are essentially containment zones. It's an island with a one-way in and one out, for example, in Hillcrest. But they have cameras. And over the years, AP Housing Authorities will cameras or one. They know stop back or what's in a fanny going on.
Your signal is very bad. I know you haven't moved, but I'm
rolling through stop sign.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Courtney?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, your signal got really bad, and I know you're not moving.
Yes.
But it's like I'm hearing every other word.
Okay.
Maybe you could start that sentence again
about
cameras in the housing authority.
Cameras in the housing authority, and
Yeah,
so they find a race quote neutral reason to stop someone. Okay. And so that's where you can use discretion, because if you see a pattern of the same thing happening over and over again, you can use your discretion to, or can you hear me? You can use your discretion to hold the officers accountable. And one example is to not prosecute a case if you think it's based on race plus policing.
Okay, let's talk about some other issues having to do with, yeah. Not good. I would have counseled you against being in a car, but you are where you are. Let's talk about officer-involved shoot.
I'm in the same.
Let's talk about officer-involved shootings. Yeah, I mean, there was a bad one in Asheville before I moved here. Talk about that case and how you would have handled it.
I think is that the juvenile? It's been years ago, I want to say. Is that a teenager? Is that what you're talking about?
You know what? I just before the show I tried to research it and it wasn't coming. I'm sorry?
Let me can you hear me?
I can hear you, but it's a signal thing. I don't think it's your audio. Weird, really weird. It's like now you're frozen. Are you clicking something? Because I'm hearing a lot of clicking.
A little better? That might be a little better.
Okay.
Yeah, I just stepped outside. I'm actually in the park.
All right.
But are you talking about the Johnny Rush case? Is that the case you're talking about? The beating case?
Yeah. What was the second name?
Okay. So it wasn't a Johnny Rush. It was not a shooting case. It was a beating of a black man in a crosswalk who worked a 12-hour shift, or I would assume probably a 12-hour shift at Cracker Barrel. And he was a dishwasher, and he was walking home at night, and former officer Hickman beat him in a crosswalk. So I would handle that differently because I would try the case. The same result, there was some type of fear from Mr. Williams. He was telling one of the forums I've been to, they had to make a decision to try to hold him accountable because of the delay in the video being released, I think is what he was blaming. There was a videotape of him getting beaten in the crosswalk. So it seemed a pretty easy case to prosecute. And again, I've done this job long enough. I can size that up pretty well. But yeah, you try the case. And not only do you try the case, you have the public there because it's an open forum. And then the public, community members, could be there to watch you try the case. And I think that was the issue with this case. He was given a conditional discharge as a first-time offender. He was given so-called restorative justice, where some guy came out of Bowie's Creek to conduct this restorative justice. And in the very end, it was calendared. I was actually in the courtroom. The courtroom was pretty empty. I don't believe a lot of people knew to be there. And it was dismissed because, on paper, the officer complied with the terms of the conditional discharge. So essentially, it was just backdoor dismissed, is what happened. So win or lose, you try the case, because to me, that's justice for somebody, so the community can view and the community could be present as a public forum.
Yeah, I find that interesting to hear this term restorative justice being used for the police officer. How often
Right.
is it used here in Buncombe County for
Never used. It has never been offered. And, and actually I can't remember the newspaper reporter from Citizen Times. It might have been Joel Burgess. I was up there for that. And I said, well, who paid for this? Who paid for this guy to come up here from Bowie's Creek to conduct this quote unquote restorative justice? And I don't think the reporter quite understood, because from the vantage point of a public defender, my clients would not have money to do that, So I don't know. I will never know the answer. If that was something.
Wait a minute. So you have to pay for restorative justice
No, that's not what I'm saying. I don't know. It was a very interesting situation. The person that conducted the restorative justice, it is not in my brain right now. I would have to look up his name. He came from Bowie's Creek. There's some program at Campbell University he has done. So he has, to my knowledge, he has never done any other case in this county other than that Hickman case. So I'm just saying, I don't know how he ended up in this situation and how he got involved. I don't know the answers to that. We'll never know the answers to that, whether or not the defense or the police benevolent. I mean, who knows? Who knows if that was a paid gig or not? We don't know. It would have been nice to know. But what I'm saying is, my clients have never been offered restorative justice.
Right. So why don't you tell the viewers what that means and why you support it?
So it's a victim-led approach. So it's basically it's making the victim whole again, or as whole as they can be, and it's led by the victim. And so that's, and again, you would have to have a facilitator to do that. But it's basically, it brings everybody back together again, but it makes that person whole again. And the person you're making whole is the victim, and it's led by them. Years ago, we used to do mediation services. Mediation services would help us out in the county courthouse. To me, it's, I guess that was the closest thing we've had to restorative justice in this county courthouse, is just to have a good neutral mediator working out situations instead of prosecuting cases, like neighbor disputes and so forth. But yeah, restorative justice could be huge. If someone has the heart to forgive and someone wants to, instead of seeing someone go to jail as a victim, then that's something that they could agree to. But again, it's always victim led.
Let's talk about some other issues that reform DAs support, such as bail reform. Talk about how bail reform is really unfair and hurts poor people, particularly poor people of color.
Yes. So the county jail averages maybe top 20s, 30%. When I checked about a month ago, when I started to run, it was at 30% Black. Our county is 6.3% Black, and that's countywide. The city's a little more dense, but this is a county jail, not a city jail. I've had a client sit in custody under a $15,000 secured bond. He missed the birth of his child. He started out under a no bond, I should say. And then once we set him a bond, he had already missed the birth of his child. He missed Thanksgiving. He missed Christmas. He was in custody for 8 months, and we had a jury trial for him in February, and he was found not guilty. So his bond was $15,000, and he could not post that bond. He was a Black male. Had he been from a wealthy family, not only could he post the $15,000 bond, but likely they could have posted a $15,000 bond in a cash bond, which means they would have even gotten the money back. My clients who do not have a lot of wealth, who do not have generational wealth, who don't have savings accounts, 401ks, when they have to post a bond, they go through a bondsman, which is backed by an insurance company. And it's normally about 10% of the total bond. So in that case, had his family had the money, which they didn't, the family probably would have been out about probably somewhere between $1,000 and $1,500 that they would never get back ever again. So a bondsman doesn't do anything. A bondsman doesn't ensure the community safety. A bondsman is making money, essentially posting bonds. And posting bonds for people that can't afford just to pay a lump sum, which would, poor and working class people. We have pretrial diversion in this county, so we have access to other resources. I know Mr. Williams indicated that he does not control the bonds. In another forum I was at, and I politely told the folks that that's not really true. It's not just up to the judges and the magistrates. The DA's office has a lot of influence when they object to a bond decrease, when they ask for a no bond, which happens fairly regularly, or when they ask to increase the bond, which also happens pretty regularly. So, folks are innocent until proven guilty. And a lot of folks are sitting in the jail in that condition. And the example of my trial back in February is a prime example. He was found not guilty after an hour of deliberation, that he sat there for 8 months. So you can work with it. Like I said, as a DA, you don't have to ask for no bonds. You don't have to ask to increase bonds. And you can actually get creative. And if you don't have paperwork, discovery, you can dismiss to indict at a later point just to get people out of custody while you're waiting for those things. Other counties do that. Folks are entitled to a probable cause hearing within 15 working days. This county has never really adhered to that.
Yeah. Talk about some other examples of racial injustices in the legal system. I remember after Michael Brown in Ferguson, a lot came out about that city and how so many people were languishing in jails because the city was poor and was trying to make money off of parking tickets. And what would happen is you'd get a parking ticket and you couldn't pay it. So there would be a penalty and there would be interest. And then maybe you would start paying off the parking ticket, but you would never pay it off. And sometimes eventually you would even land in jail. Do we have any instances like that here in Asheville that you can think of?
We have probation. Probation is interesting. We don't have parking ticket issues as far as that's concerned. But when folks are placed on probation, they're in the system. And I can't tell you how many probation violations I've dealt with where it's a monies only violation, or it's a monies only violation and say you didn't do some community service. I just saw a case actually 2 days ago of a young lady that apparently stole something from Walmart in McDowell County. And best I could recall, she didn't pay her monies. She was a young mom. She had 2 new babies and another baby, or another young child, and she didn't do her community service. She had twins. Okay. And probation asked to put her in jail for 3 days and then terminate her probation. Now, what did that ever accomplish? So probation, they want to get money out of people. So to me, that's probably more akin to what you're talking about. If their monies are not paid in full, probation's policy will be that they violate, even if it's monies only, even if it's not even restitution. I'm just talking about court costs, for example. Within 120 days before the case expires, they will file a violation report alleging a willful violation of probation. Lady that went to jail for 3 days, my heart ached for her because, I'm thinking, did she tell her kids she was going on vacation? Because that's not truthful, right? You got to be truthful to your children. Or did she tell her children that mom's going to jail because I stole something from Walmart, I didn't pay my money, and I didn't do community service? Which is horrible, because now you have a child that doesn't have their mom for 3 nights. And I have a 10-year-old daughter, and that's horrible for stealing something from Walmart in McDowell County.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of petty crimes that are going on right now because of drug use. And somebody just posted something just now in the nextdoor.com. Let me see if I can share the screen here and show people. Let's see. I'm going to read this to you in case you can't see it. It was just posted in Nextdoor. Anyone recognize these two? They smashed my car window in broad daylight at the Grove Park Inn and stole my purse. This is them at their first stop using my credit cards. Please help me identify them so they don't just get away with that. And so that, that probably happens multiple times a day. Now, how do we know? Well, let's break up the issue. I mean, it could be a drug crime in which they're stealing to feed their habit, or they just could be criminals. What would you do in a case like that? What judgment would you apply to figure out? Because it sounds like what you're trying to do here is come up with reasons, to try to understand the situation of the quote unquote criminal.
Right.
And come at this with some heart, with some compassion, rather than just a sense of punishment and vengeance. So in a case like this, how would you approach this?
Right. So you always want to know what their story is, right? And their defense lawyer could convey that. Hopefully they can convey that. And I would say doing this job for 17 years, it probably is a drug crime. But you also have to make the victim whole, because this poor lady has her purse stolen, right? So the ideal situation would be if they start receiving treatment, they can start making amends, and they could get on their 2 feet and start perhaps even making restitution to the lady whose purse was stolen, right? And we have drug treatment court in this county that's been here since, I believe, the late 2000s. It's been here a long time. It was created under Judge Payne, who's long retired. And that would be an ideal situation in that case, because that way somebody could get the treatment they need, they could be held accountable, but they could also make the victim whole.
What if the victim wants vengeance? What if the victim doesn't really care about
vengeance? That's okay, because the victim is not the prosecutor. It's always at the discretion of the district attorney. The victim has a right to be heard. And you know what? Over the years, as long as I've dealt with these cases, I've talked to many victims too. Defense attorneys are allowed to talk to victims. We just have to let them know ethically, hey, we represent so-and-so. I'm his lawyer. You don't have to talk to me, but would you be willing? And I would say 95, 98% of the time, folks will hear you out. And most people are not bad people. I mean, really and truly, especially if the situation's explained, and especially if we're meeting in the middle and saying, hey, we're going to get this person treatment, try to keep them from doing such activities in your neighborhood, and make you whole again. A lot of people out there do not even know how to go about getting treatment. I mean, really and truly, it's so bad sometimes for people, they have nowhere to turn. There was a lady yesterday I ran into. She asked me to help her, and I didn't even know her, because another client of mine knew that I can help people. And she had gone up somewhere and asked for help, and they said, well, you need to go to detox. I said, well, did they call detox for you? She goes, no. I said, well, do you have a phone? She goes, no. I said, well, then how are you getting to detox? So there's so many people out there that are just so hardshiped. She's sleeping in a tent. She's terrified she's going to be raped. And this poor lady needs somebody to help her. And, sometimes when you come into contact with the criminal justice system, sometimes that is the first time you get put into a place to get help.
Well, sadly, this is the case with not only drug issues, but also mental health issues.
Yeah.
The court system and the jail becomes the institution that you're dealing with, because, we deinstitutionalized the mental institutions in the 80s, and there were no halfway houses in the communities coming up, which is what was supposed to happen. But a lot of NIMBYs didn't want them because they thought the mentally ill were dangerous, similar to how they think the homeless are dangerous right now. Right. They don't have homeless shelters in their neighborhoods. Right. But there are a lot of petty crimes. And, right now in Los Angeles and San Francisco, these reform DAs, they're trying to recall them because crime has gone up, and not just petty crime. A lot of this has to do with the pandemic too in the last 2 years. And so they're trying to recall these DAs that have a heart, as I call it, um, because they're not prosecuting like these nonviolent crimes. And even in Asheville, where the police have been de facto defunded, I mean, the city council didn't defund them, but 42% of them left because of low pay and bad morale. And there was a whole article in the New York Times about after the George Floyd protest, people just said, we don't need to take this crap, from the public. So what is your opinion about prosecuting these non-violent crimes? And a related question, just the other day in the paper, the police chief proudly announced that their detective unit had captured all these people. They listed these people's names. They listed their charges, whether they were misdemeanors, felonies. So even if there weren't felonies and they weren't going to go on their record, which is terrible because if you have a felony, you can't get a job, you can't get housing. But even if it's just a misdemeanor, now they're sort of publicly shamed.
Right.
So what is your opinion about these types of crimes? Would you prosecute them? I mean, I guess it's on a case-by-case basis, right?
Yeah, I think it would be on a case by case basis. And I'll say this just as a defense attorney. And, people, want second degree trespass, folks, which is a 20-day maximum sentence if you're the worst level, put in the county jail. It's, well, from a defense attorney standpoint, if someone is going to put your client in jail for 20 days, all right, we'll just have a trial. Have a trial in district court, win or lose. Guess what you get to do if you have a trial in district court, win or lose? If you lose, you get to have a jury trial. So, I mean, you have to take those considerations and you have to consider that because defense attorneys aren't idiots, right? I mean, if that's going to become the standard where you're going to lock people away from maximum sentences, 20 days for urinating in public, for trespassing, trying to think if those were some of the other petty crimes, then why plead guilty? Just bog down the system and have jury trials. I mean, I'm just saying, so you have to think reasonably about a lot of these charges. I mean, we do have resources in the community. We do have Justice Resource. They're an awesome resource. The county of Buncombe County does really well with Justice Resource Center. And we could get people, when you get people into connection with services, even if you pled it to a misdemeanor and put them on probation, they're still going to be held accountable. They're still going to be required to pay restitution if it's there, but they can at least be given an opportunity and be provided with resources. But again, you can't just lock people away for 20-day sentences because they're trespassing. It'll never work. And we've never done that, quite frankly. Even under a law and order DA, we've never done that.
You might want to turn on the light in your car. You're getting very dark.
It's getting dark. I didn't know it'd be. There we go. It might be too bright. There we go.
That's a little better.
It's
Actually,
a little better.
It seems like it's in the back of you.
A little better.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
I've been canvassing today, and then I had the other meeting, so I've just been kind of on a whirlwind. But
okay, well, you're a little orange, but we can see you now. You look like a pumpkin. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
So these crimes dealing with drug abuse, again, we know that it's very hard. It's not even, especially with the opioids, it's not even just a matter of getting detoxed. It changes your brain chemistry. I mean, I learned this from watching Dope Sick, of all things. I always assume that if you just get physically clean, if you have the mental resolve, you can stay clean. But it absolutely changes your brain chemistry to the point where you're craving it. And then you need to have, the Suboxone and methadone, whatever dones, you can use. What do you think about this? I had lunch with Matthew Ho, who is running for senator in North Carolina. He's trying to get on the ballot to run as a Green Party candidate. His platform is 100% legalization, even hard drugs. And I discussed this with him, and he said it really works. He was telling me about Portugal. He said in Portugal, the incidence of crime has gone down drastically since drugs have been made legal, because then you don't have people, you don't have people stealing for it. Now, I don't necessarily think that people should be paying, the taxpayers should be paying so people could get drugs, but what's your opinion on that? I mean, no chance it'll ever happen in this state, but
Yeah, in my opinion, is we're always going to lose a war on drugs. I mean, I was a kid of the 80s. I'm 43, so I remember the DARE presentations and the pencils and Nancy Reagan in her size extra, extra small little outfit telling everyone not to use drugs. And it's ridiculous. I mean, it's a joke. It's an absolute joke. And she was telling, urban kids whose parents had already been incarcerated in Chicago not to use drugs. Like, okay, perfect. Right. So you're always going to battle drugs. It's you just throw money, throw money, throw money at it. It's never going to keep people from wanting drugs, in my opinion. I always say it's like a game of whack-a-mole. Even like when if someone arrests a drug dealer, another drug dealer is going to pop right up. I mean, we're capitalist, right? I mean, it's supply and demand in America, and it just doesn't work. So right now it's illegal, right? So I don't ever foresee that all drugs will become legalized in the state of North Carolina, at least not before I die at age, I'm 40. But yeah, it's not winning. And that's so funny you mentioned Portugal today. I was having a very interesting conversation with a man in the hallway that was not my client, but he was there for a charge, and he was an addict. And I was talking really openly about how much he thinks that he's got it handled. And then all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, he gets this craving and he has to go use. And he said he was doing so well, so well, so well. Some monumental thing happened in his life. And he went and he goes, quote, "I ran straight to the dope man. And now here I am." And he was actually talking about Portugal. That's really interesting today. This is the second time in a day that I've had this conversation about Portugal. So it's kind of
yeah,
interesting, but he
yeah,
struggled, and he's not tried Suboxone. We talked about that, but and again, this isn't even my client. It's just a man in the hallway talking very openly about his addiction. And yeah, I don't think it would ever happen, but it makes perfect sense, because you're never gonna win.
Now, what do you say to these people? And there's a lot of them. There's an entire slate running for mayor and city council, 4 people who are the law and order slate. And I think there's a good segment of the
Hmm.
population. I was sitting next to a woman today at the mayor's forum who is a Republican, who supports this. They don't care about these people's stories. They don't want to see people, I even spoke to a liberal, a fellow Bernie Sanders supporter, who told me today that she has a friend who was talking to her about this guy who takes a dump right in front of her store. And we know this is happening. People are urinating and defecating on people's lawns. People are throwing out trash. I mean, to my mind, they don't have enough trash cans in Los Angeles, where I used to live, in Asheville. They don't have enough public bathrooms. Those are 2 easy fixes for me that I see. But meanwhile, they're criminalizing people for being homeless, or they're just shuffling them around. What do you think, you can do as a DA to deal with the homeless situation, or to allay these people's concerns without, criminalizing homelessness? I guess is
I
my
mean,
question.
I think you have to hook them up with resources as best as you can. This homeless diversion program, or unsheltered, I think that Mr. Williams is talking about. We don't even know what he's talking about, because we've never seen. It's something that we've just heard about in the past couple of months, but no one has told us that it's even up and running, or that you could put someone in it. And I would think we would be the first to know.
Yeah.
But running along that plan, you have to get people connected with resources. Um, to my knowledge, I don't know if our numbers have increased that drastically regarding our population numbers. Um, I might be wrong about that, but I don't think they've gone up drastically. I know the police force is down drastically, so that may play a role in just more things going on. But I don't think our numbers have gone up significantly. But yeah, you get them hooked up with resources. And like the young lady I talked to yesterday, again, wasn't a client. She is desperate for help. She has a child involved with DSS. She's trying to make her DSS appointments to see her child. She is sleeping in a tent where she is scared of getting raped. And then she went to seek some help, and they told her to get into detox, but no one made a phone call.
Yeah.
And it was the saddest thing for this woman. It was cold outside. She had a duffel bag across her body. She's trying to go see her, I believe, her 9-year-old son, make her appointment at DSS. And, I told her, I said, I'm on my way somewhere right now, but I will be back. My name's Courtney Booth. Come see me. I'll make a phone call, but you have to help people. And, I went to a function in this race where it was a conservative function and there was a Christian prayer set. And then I'm getting questions asked about whether or not to get rid of a needle exchange. And
Yeah.
I only wish I had said, wait a minute, I just said a Christian prayer, before this started at your request. And now you're going to have the nerve to ask me about getting rid of clean needles for someone who's so addicted and so pitiful. And just that's awful.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and yeah, I'm tired of it. We're all tired of it. I had a campaign sign moved, and I thought somebody stole it because they were mad at me or something. And I ended up finding it next to the old Arby's, but it was right next to a Republican sign. So it wasn't against me, but it was a gnat mat. Somebody took my campaign sign, which is maybe a 1/4 inch of plastic, and put it with another campaign sign to sleep on. I mean,
Wow.
and that's, you have to have a heart for people.
Let me ask you another question about reform DAs, because it's not only, well, no, first let me ask you about one more example of crime, violent crime.
Okay.
Because, there was just an article in the paper today about another man who killed 2 people. And did he kill him or just shoot him? I can't remember. I just looked at it super quickly in the paper.
I, I have not looked at the paper today, but
I think his
normally I
first
look at
name was
it.
DeMarcus or something like that. I'm not sure. Anyway, I just because I was trying to look up this police, what I thought was a police murder, but you said it was a beating. It wasn't a murder.
I think
Um,
that's the case.
there's a tremendous amount of violent crime. There were like, I don't know, how many homicides? It was like 100 and, oh God, I wish I had made these notes. I'm sorry I didn't make these notes, but let me
Okay.
see. Um, no, I'm not going to be able to figure it out because there's too many articles when I Google it.
So I think
There's a lot of violent crime. There's a lot of homicides. What do you do about that as a DA?
right. And so a lot of it's black on black violence. Um, and I think you have to work within the community. Um, it's been, it's my opinion that there's not trust within the community of police, especially in the black communities. And, I talked about the body camera. I've talked about watching people on video, coming up with race, in my opinion, race plus reasons to pull someone over. Um, and when there's not trust in the community, people will arm themselves because they're scared, right? I've had so many clients tell me that they're scared of where they live, which is in a lot of housing areas in Asheville. Um, and I think we have to work as a community. I think education is a key component, right? So if you have someone who's dropping out in the 9th grade, who realizes that now they're going to be working a job making $13 an hour, or perhaps they can hustle. And sometimes with hustling means you have to carry a gun in order to protect yourself from being robbed. Um, you know, we have so many organizations to get people on the right track when they start getting on the wrong track. But if the community doesn't feel that the police cares about them, it's a huge problem. And I think I've told you this before. I've had a member of Asheville Police Department Housing Authority officers tell me that he worked, quote, end quote, in the ghetto. And to
Mm,
me, disparaging language like that means that you don't care about the people you're protecting and serving. Um, and you're not actually out to help them or save them or to protect them.
yeah.
Um, and
Well,
I think if you have to have trust in the community, and I don't think there's trust in the community.
Well, I will tell you a couple of things. There was a recent Pew study that said of African Americans' major concerns, their number one was their economic situation, and their number two was crime. So we have to be careful, I think, as white liberals, to understand, and in fact, James Clyburn said it, when he was saying defund the police was like the worst slogan. It was the worst thing the Democrats could have come up with. And it doesn't even really mean that. It really just means that police aren't answering all these calls. Like someone said to me today that um, if that police should not pull someone over for a traffic stop unless they're driving recklessly or something, because too many of those incidents can lead to, an incident. We know Sandra Bland with the, broken turn signal or whatever. What was I saying? Oh yeah. So in the old days, like the sheriff that I interviewed back in LA, who turned out to be really right wing, and he's allowing all these gangs in the LA Sheriff's Department. And I have another question about these gangs that a viewer asked here. He was saying, like, when he was growing up, the police were like the cop on the beat. They knew the people in the community. If they saw one kid going wrong, they could bring him home to the parents. That's what community policing is supposed to be all about. But as we've militarized our police over the years, what's that? When there's a hole, the hammer is the only solution. There's some expression there about when the hammer is your only tool, then you know what I'm trying to say. Like, if that's what you're being given, that's what you're going to
Yep.
use. So I just wonder, like, from a DA's point of view, with some of these, what would be your approach to some of these, like you say, black on black crimes, which we understand the cause of, but once there is a victim, those parents of the victim, they want justice too. So what's your plan as a DA for those kind of violent crimes?
Right. Well, I mean, if there's a victim involved in a violent crime, you have to listen to the victim, and like I said, there can be a victim led, not necessarily all the time, but we talked about restorative justice earlier. I mean, certain offices have even used restorative justice for very violent crimes, depending on how the victim feels. Um, but you still have to prosecute crime, and you have to hold people accountable. Um, that would be your job as a DA. So yeah, I would listen to families. I would communicate with families. I think that's been a big obstacle in the current office is folks are not communicating with folks. I've been often the first person that makes a phone call to a prosecuting witness victim, and no one's talked to them. And sometimes I'm the first one that calls, and I'm talking about months. And
Yeah.
we're trying to work out a resolution, giving them a call. So yeah, you have to prosecute crimes. You have to hold people accountable, especially if it's a violent crime. That's not saying that there's not an opportunity for restorative justice. There can be. But again, that's always a victim led approach. And I will say this, before I forget, the community policing. I think that's still the concept because there's a certain section for Asheville Housing Authority police. Years ago, I had a jury trial where it was carrying concealed guns. It was a misdemeanor, but I always refuse. I tried my hardest never to plead a young black male to carrying concealed gun because a second charge can be a felony or will be a felony. And then all of a sudden now they're a felon. And so I lost a bench trial, had a jury trial because I'm like, I'm not doing this. And I won the jury trial. But when the officer was testifying, who was part of Asheville Housing Authority, he said, as part of Asheville Housing Authority police, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, it's been several years, I'm tasked with finding drugs and guns. And I said, excuse me? I said, you're a police officer. I said, so if you worked in North Asheville or, that's your job? Excuse me? And so that's what I'm talking about, the trust. If
Yeah.
that is your task and you're literally testifying under oath, and this is probably about 3 or 4 years ago in this offer test, then that's a problem. That's a problem with protecting and serving the community. And to me, that's not a community based policing.
Well,
And I've
yeah,
heard
exactly.
so many times is we don't trust them.
I did a show, I did a covered Occupy the LAPD, which was, where some activists from Black Lives Matter and Dignity and Power for Now and other organizations, racial justice organizations in Los Angeles were camping outside the police department because there were so many officer involved shootings, more so than anywhere else in the country. And the DA, Jackie Lacey, didn't prosecute a single one of them. But in any case, I interviewed a young woman, and she was telling me that when the police come into their community, the young kids act as snitches. They go and tell everybody, the police are coming, the police are coming, because they're afraid of the police. She was saying she's asked to pull over and sit on the curb and take off her shoes and socks and empty them out. I mean, what an indignity. Can you imagine that happening in North Asheville? I don't know if that happens here in Asheville, but I, remember it from Los Angeles vividly.
Well, and what you also cannot imagine is if you're on a live feed camera stream, right? I've not joked, I've kind of joked, but if a live stream camera feed was in an affluent neighborhood, literally people would be coming up to the mayor's office. They would be tearing down the police chief's office, right? But this is in housing. There's a live stream camera, and it's awful. It's just awful. People would lose their mind in North Asheville if that was going on.
All right, let me ask you this question that my friend from, actually, he's up in Santa Barbara area, Ron Karashi, posted. He told me today on Facebook that a Southern Poverty Law Center report showed that something like 30% of officers are white supremacists, and it's even more in the South. So his question is, what's your sense of the threat of white supremacist involvement with an active population of law enforcement in the judicial system? And pushback on it seems to be a freedom of speech issue.
Well, I don't loosely call someone a white supremacist. I don't think that's fair to do that.
Well, first answer the first part of the
I'm
question. Do you think there's white supremacists in the police force and in the sheriff's,
do I think there's racism? Yeah. I don't know if they're a member of a white supremacist organization or not. I don't know those answers. But again, the comments and the things I've seen over the years, I'm very aware that there's likely racism. I don't know if I can answer it as to a white supremacist. Like I don't lightly call someone a white supremacist. I don't know.
Well, they have active gangs in the LAPD, and it's a big issue. In the sheriff's department. Well, we're running out of time. I wanted to ask you one more question about what reformist DAs do, which is spend time prosecuting white collar things like wage theft, like illegal evictions by landlords, like illegal dumping. I just was reading also in Nextdoor about a business that was dumping stuff in the Swananoa River. So what other kinds of things would you be prioritizing as DA that aren't being prioritized by the current DA?
Okay, that's an interesting question. For as long as I've been here, I've not seen landlord-tenant issues being prosecuted, like self-help eviction, I guess is what you were talking about. Honestly, something not thought about. I'm humble. I'll tell you, I haven't thought. I've never, but I will say that I'm open. I'm open to those ideas. If somebody is doing harm to someone, I want to hear about it. I think right now you would be hard pressed if the police department, the way they're saying they're down, and everybody, I don't real. But
some of these things you need
services, and they're a wonderful organization that represent.
I guess what I'm getting at, and I talked about this with Chase Boudin, in San Francisco, is they make cases like things like wage theft. A lot of employees don't even know that they're being stolen from. Would you put in detectives on something like this? Or would you, if you found out that there was this dumping in the Swanano River, would you just take the business's word that, oh, they didn't know they were doing it, even though this is had happened multiple times and it was in the middle of the night, so obviously they didn't want to be seen. These are things
Right.
that,
Yeah.
embezzlement, extortion,
Okay.
other things that, DAs prosecute.
Yeah, we embezzlement's always been prosecuted. I mean, and I've
Yeah.
seen extortion be prosecuted. I haven't seen wage theft being prosecuted. I don't know how feasible that would be. If it was brought to someone's attention, sure. I just don't know if folks are, if law enforcement needs to be at this point in time using limited resources, because we already know that they're strapped and they're down to search for wage theft. That's just what I'm saying. So if someone's polluting a river over and over again, that might be a story.
I mean, is that in your jurisdiction? Because I remember asking Joe Bowman about it, and he said some, official river keeper organization would need to get involved in it in order for it to happen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, again, I'm humble. I'll tell you, I may not know all the answers. I've never seen that prosecuted here. I'm open to learning a lot of new things. But I've never here. I've never tenant house. Land disputes
Okay,
end
well,
up in
you're
the system.
breaking up again, and we're at the end of our hour.
It's normal because the land takes up.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me just ask you to tell people
I haven't moved.
before you go how people can donate and contribute to your campaign. All right, we may have to put this in the comments.
Yes, it's Courtney. Thank you. It's Courtney Booth for DA. It's FOR, Courtney, COURTNEY, Booth, BOOTH, for FORDA.com is my website with an Act Blue button. And then, yeah.
And how's the campaign doing? How's the campaign doing?
I'm hustling. I think I'm working hard. I've probably walked 10 miles, 8 miles Saturday, Sunday, 5 miles Friday. I'm coming door to door. I think people are very receptive. I think sometimes with local races, a lot of people don't know that someone's running. And a lot of people don't really know much about the office. I've had several people ask me, is it a city position? I said, nope, it's a countywide position. Okay, it's FOR. Do FOR instead of the 4.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. But yeah, I'm getting my name out there, and people know where I come from. People know I care. And it's been a joy even running into folks that I've represented over the years, because I was literally walking through the courthouse yesterday.
Oh, I spelled it
completely
wrong.
Unprovoked.
I'll get it right.
Someone
I'll get it right.
Okay, someone looked at me. I was just walking through the courthouse, and I think it was one of my old clients. I'm not even certain, and just said, "Courtney Booth, I'm voting for you." And that meant a lot for me. And I've had so many clients over the years. I didn't solicit it. He just literally saw me in the courthouse and said that. So it's going. I want to do the right thing for the community. I want to stand up. I'm a person that will always stand up, and I will never back down. If I see something that's an injustice happening, I will never back down.
Well, I appreciate you coming from this compassionate viewpoint that you come from. And I hope that the Christians in this county will realize what it means to be a Christian and will stop, taking away needles and start considering, the circumstances of the people who they're so afraid of and feel so vindictive towards.
And everybody has a story. You know, everybody has a story. And just like the young lady I met yesterday, she's not my client, but she had a story, right? And so she's not scary. She's hooked on fentanyl. She's living in a tent and she just needs help. And she's significant. So everybody has a story. So you shouldn't be scared of this poor woman because she has a duffel bag walking through downtown.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Courtney. There needs to be more people like you in this world. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Lauren. I appreciate you.
Great. Well, my next show is going to be with Kim Roney, who's another compassionate person on the city council who is running for mayor. We haven't lined up exactly which date that's going to be, but if you follow my page, it'll be announced as soon as I schedule it. And after that, I don't know, I'm going to try to maybe get some more candidates, but early voting, I believe, begins on Thursday. And may the best candidate win. That's all I can say. So thanks everybody for watching. Please share this show and keep fighting for change.